Hey, everybody, and welcome back for a Monday edition of Your Lunch Break with me, Ivana. And today we have a lot to talk about because Jefferson County, which encompasses Birmingham and the surrounding areas like Mountain Brook, Hoover, parts of Hoover, Vestavia, Homewood, the county is moving to a mask ordinance starting today. Now, we got news of this last week, but the mask ordinance officially goes into effect today. So our own Dennis Pillion is here to talk about this mask ordinance, everything involved with that, and also to take your questions. So if you have questions, leave them here. I will be monitoring them and letting Dennis know what questions y'all have as we go. So if you have questions, let us know. And otherwise, Dennis, let's just talk about the meat of this ordinance. Now, it was passed last week, or it was announced last week, rather, and it goes into effect today. So what does this countywide ordinance really mean?
So for this one, it goes into effect at 5 p.m. today, and it means that all people in Jefferson County, if you are in public, if you are in a restaurant, a store, a business, anything like that, you have to wear a mask unless there's a set of exceptions that we'll talk about. But generally, unless you're one of those exceptions, you are now required to wear a mask in Jefferson County when you're in public, in a store, in a restaurant, or even in an outdoor area where 10 or more people are less than 6 feet apart.
So we're already getting a lot of questions on how this applies, and there's a lot of little parts of this ordinance. So we can go ahead and get to one of them. This is from Jeff, and he says, "Is this for inside public places or outside or both?"
So this is for all inside public places, with a couple of exceptions that are laid out in the order. And then in the outdoor spaces where people are interacting in close proximity. So the way it's actually worded is, I believe, anywhere in an outdoor space where you could have 10 or more people that would not be able to stay 6 feet apart.
So that it seems like it's for both, Jeff, unless you were in an outdoor space where there are 9 of you or less, and you are able to keep your distance. So, or if you're able to keep your distance. So that's another question I think a lot of people are asking is, look, what if I'm in a public space and I can keep my distance, I can keep the recommended social distancing of 6 feet or more. Do I still have to have the mask?
If you were indoors, I believe that yes, you would still have to wear a mask in that situation. So, and again, the city of Birmingham has had a similar mask ordinance in effect for a long time, since May, I believe. But now this order that I was announced on Friday takes effect today. But that kind of basically it extends what was already in place in Birmingham out to the rest of Jefferson County as well.
And that, you're right, that is something that we've seen in the city limits of Birmingham here for several weeks. And this is just now encompassing a bigger area in the entire county. We'll get into a couple more of these like provisions in this ordinance. But first I wanted to answer, I believe it was Evan talking about how this can happen. Well, there are, outside the state, there's 2 counties that can enact things like this, ordinances, and that have a separate health authority. And that is Jefferson County and Mobile County. And those are the only 2 counties that have their own health authority. Dennis, do you want to explain anything else? I think Evan was asking, what gives them the power to do this?
Yeah, so basically, most of the public health operations in the state of Alabama are run by the State Department of Public Health. Jefferson County and Mobile County have their own health departments that, until this COVID situation happened, not a lot of people would ever pay attention and notice how that was working. But in those Mobile and Jefferson County, the county health departments have the same authority that the state health department has for the rest of the state. So, whereas that's just a function of the county health department. They have that statutory authority to make these kind of health orders when public health demands it. And there's different kind of verbiage around that. I'm not a lawyer, so I don't want to try to quote it and get something wrong. But they have that authority to protect the general public health of everyone.
And like you said, this is something with the Jefferson County Health Authority and the Mobile County being separate and independent. This is something that a lot of us probably weren't educated on and didn't know very much about before the pandemic hit, because we had thankfully never really had a reason to. So I know that sounds a little bit crazy to a lot of people, and that's why they're asking questions. And but that is the case. Those are the two health authorities. So a lot of different questions about people and getting their mask and where they can get their mask. We will give you that information as we have it. We do have several stories on AL.com about that. But something else that I want to talk about with this order is people are asking more about exemptions. So I've got some notes right here on this, and correct me if I'm wrong, Dennis, but this order does not apply to children under the age of 2. Does not apply to churches, schools, medical procedures, hair care services, or for people whom a mask may prevent a safety hazard. So the children requirement, or the under 2 requirement, I think is self-explanatory. But can you tell us a little bit about the churches and the schools provision?
Yeah, and actually for children, the order does not apply to children under 2, but it says children from 2 to 8. It's up to the discretion of the parents or the caregivers. So actually, even though in the text of the ordinance says children under 2, when Dr. Wilson was explaining this, he talks about really it's children under 8. It's going to be up to the parents in those cases, or the babysitter or whoever is taking care of that child at that time. As far as churches goes, Dr. Wilson talked about this kind of in depth on Friday, and he said, that yes, I mean, COVID has been known to spread to churches. Those were some of the first outbreaks that we had here in Alabama were centered around churches, where people obviously congregating, obviously being in close proximity, singing, speaking loudly. Those are activities that can spread a lot of little droplets that this virus can live on. So even he said that was a case where even though he knows that the virus can be spread at churches and is spread at churches, that was one where he really wanted to kind of take a lighter approach. And the wording of the ordinance says that it will be up to the church's discretion. So the individual church can decide, what do we need to do best for our congregation? Can we space everybody out enough where we don't have to require this? Can we find some other way to accommodate this? Or do we just want to say, wear a mask to go to church? It's the new Sunday hat. But and he said he did that, deliberately, because he does not want to, he wants to be careful of religious liberties. He doesn't want to be heavy-handed and force the churches to do things if they don't want to do them.
And then kind of in that same boat, he did say that the school exception is something that he has kind of given the authority to the Department of Education, the State Department of Education, to let them decide what needs to happen in their schools, especially come fall. Now, question I'm seeing from Griffin, and I think it's funny you asked this, Griffin, because I had a text from some of my girlfriends over the weekend asking the same thing. And he says, so if I want to sip my coffee in a coffee shop, do you move your mask to take a sip and put it back on? And again, I had people texting me and asking, well, do I take a bite and then put it back on?
So, and the order is actually pretty specific about that. It says that there's an exemption for eating and drinking, so you can take your mask off when you're eating and drinking, when you're sitting down at a table somewhere. The ordinance says that you're supposed to put the mask back on when you're interacting with someone
who is not at your table.
Someone who is not at your table. Yes, good call. So a server or bartender comes over, you're supposed to put your mask back on to talk to them, to order something else, to do, that kind of thing, what have you. Otherwise, you can take your mask off, eat your meal, have your coffee, and then put it back on when you're ready to go and check out or do whatever.
So Griffin, it looks like the answer to your question is no. You do not have to take a sip, put a mask on, take another sip. That would be extremely complicated. It looks like that when you walk into a restaurant, to a coffee shop, or to any business like that, you wear your mask, you sit down at your table, take it off, and then when you get up to go to the restroom or to leave or to interact with somebody not at your table, you are supposed to put the mask back on. But no, you do not have to put it on in between bites or sips. I know that that's something a lot of people have been asking about. Something else that was interesting in this ordinance, Dennis, was that there is not an end date.
That is correct. The order it's a health order, not an ordinance. There are slight differences, but the order is in effect until the county health officer, Dr. Wilson, until he determines that conditions warrant changing it. So this is in effect indefinitely. And with the COVID numbers doing what they are, it may be here for a while.
Do you have somebody is asking, Susan was asking at the Splash Adventure Park in Jefferson County if this will be enacted there. Do you know anything about attractions like the water park, like the zoos and places like that? Are they also required to follow the mask ordinance?
I don't know, to be honest. That is something that was not addressed in the press conference, and I don't think there is any specific exemption for entertainment venues. There's one for private clubs and gatherings, which I suppose that would not be. And there's an exemption carved out for indoor athletic facilities, for gyms, for, if you're running on a treadmill and going to be breathing heavily, then that might not work to wear a mask during that. So there's an exemption there. I don't know that I've seen anything here that would cover a trip to a water park.
So you talk again about gyms, and that's another one of these exemptions we need to talk about. So the order says that if you are exercising indoors at a gym, that you do not have to wear a mask. But if any instructor or anybody that works at a gym, and if they are in regular contact with clients, that they are supposed to be wearing masks.
Yes, that's right. And that's kind of, it's reflective of how the virus actually spreads, and the fact that, it can be spread from a person who is not feeling any symptoms, who is feeling fine. They might actually be contagious and not know it. So they might be spreading that. And so, if there's a fitness instructor who's in pretty good shape, and maybe they wouldn't be as affected by it, but that person could still be contagious. So the idea is that if that person is wearing a face mask, then they're going to be spreading fewer of those droplets when they're telling you how to do your squats right, and that they won't, pass the virus along with their message on how to work out properly.
Right. And I know at least if you're like me and we've been in lockdown a while, it is time. I need to get back in there and get doing those squats. So a couple of other people asking about, what if you're working in an office? What if you go in and you sit maybe in a cubicle or in a place that is maybe distance from other people, or if you have your own office? How does the mask ordinance apply to workplaces?
So I believe I'm going to double check before I say this too loudly. And by the way, the full text of this ordinance is in the story, which I believe is linked here. So if you do have any more specific questions than what I can do here, you can go and read the actual text of the order, which might help. So I believe that for the way it's worded is for places where the public might enter. So if you're in an office, it's businesses or venues open to the general public. So if you would not expect the general public to be walking into your office, then I would not think that would be covered under this order. But if you're working in a store, if you're working in a customer service business, a bank, someplace where the general public would expected to be walking in regularly, then that would be covered under this order.
So we got another question from Tamara, and she asks, is there a fine if an individual or business does not comply? And if so, what? And we've gotten a lot of people, including ourselves, that are talking about enforcement of this order. So what do you know about the fines, like Tamara asked, or just enforcement in general?
Yeah, so the order itself does not list a specific penalty for violation. These health orders are enforceable, by law enforcement. The Jefferson County Sheriff Office, has said, not specifically to this order, but about health orders in general and COVID-related health orders in general, that the Sheriff's Office can and will enforce these things. The Birmingham City Police, the municipal police, can enforce these things.
We don't know
the actual experience of enforcement can, I guess, is up to the local jurisdiction, and obviously, not everyone is following the letter of these ordinances so far, but it's kind of confusing. It's hard to know exactly what to do, and you have to kind of do the extra research and kind of make sure you're staying within the letter of the law there.
And it just in the short answer too to people like Tamara who ask, well, what is the fine? What is the punishment? In short, we just don't know. That was not listed in the health order, correct?
Yeah, there's no like a dollar amount listed. I believe the health officer, like we've seen with restaurant reviews and those kind of things, they can go in and close businesses if they are not complying with the law. So I think it would be not exactly correlated, but something like, if a restaurant failed a health inspection, that kind of a thing.
This is an interesting question from Jennifer, and this is something that Dennis and I were actually talking about before we went live. So I thought it was important to put on here. And Jennifer asks, what about private parties on private property, like a 4th of July party or a cookout?
Yeah, and it seems like, again, that would fall under those categories. If there are 10 or more people, then that would probably. Although that would probably fall under the order, but I don't know that the sheriff's deputies would be walking around to house parties.
So again, that's kind of one of these gray areas, Jennifer. We've got this health order that says if you're in an outdoor space with 10 or less, then you don't have to wear that mask. But if you have 10 or more people, you are supposed to wear that mask. But again, enforcement is a different conversation. So that's one of the gray areas. And July 4th, we know Birmingham has not canceled the fireworks display of Thunder on the Mountain here at Vulcan. And that is something that I think we're all a little bit curious about how this is going to play out.
Yeah. And one thing too about enforcement, I know the health department and the sheriff's office they have tools, as they like to say, they have tools they can use to get people to comply. They would much rather, they would rather have compliance than enforcement, I would say. So they're hoping that, now that people know this is serious, now that this is an ordinance, that people will kind of just voluntarily comply and do this. They're not looking to go out and write citations and, they don't really want to bring the hammer. They're hoping to use some of the carrot, I guess.
Michelle asks, how long is this order in for? Is there a time limit? Michelle, there is not. There was no time limit that was put on this mask other than it begins today and that it is in effect until the county health officer determines otherwise. So we don't have a firm date on that one. Got another question from Mandy about water parks. We're going to have to look into that for y'all because I honestly wouldn't have thought about that one. I don't think Dennis would have either. So we'll look into it.
I did not know.
We'll look into it and we'll let you know. Pamela, I have a hotel booked in Alabama for Friday night. I have masks. Is anything going to affect my stay for one night? Do you know anything about hotels or different lodging areas, what their requirements are like, Dennis?
I think it would depend on the hotel. And if the hotel is not in Jefferson County, then it wouldn't. But if the hotel is in Jefferson County, then I would think if you're going to be hanging out in the lobby bar area, that would be a public space. So you would be required to wear a mask there. But as far as just staying in a hotel, going to your room, I don't see how this would affect that.
Got it. Getting more comments about churches, and Kathy made a comment about her church saying she's overcoming cancer. That's awesome, Kathy. Good for you. We are thinking about you, and go you. Screw cancer and go you. Go Kathy. Churches is something that we talked about. We're getting more questions about spas. Amber and a couple other people asked about spas. And there was a clause in this ordinance, and I'm looking at it now, and it said something about hair care services. So How does that fit in?
So that's actually a lot like, it's worded similarly to the exception for eating and drinking. It says that if you are getting your hair cut, getting some kind of treatment like that where the mask would get in the way, then you are allowed to remove the mask while you are getting your hair cut, while you are, having whatever you need done. You can take the mask off for that.
Dennis is not super familiar with spas, I do not believe.
That I confess, yes, guilty or not guilty. But yeah, so it's essentially worded so that the mask, you can remove the mask, but only if it would interfere with the treatment that you're getting or with whatever service you're receiving. So, haircuts, shaves, barbershops, whatever other people do, I don't know. But I think if basically the way it's worded, if you can still do it and leave the mask on, then that's what you're supposed to do.
So Amber, I think that's a great correlation that Dennis made, is that it's kind of like restaurants. If you can, once you get to your spot and you're there with your people, you can take it off. But when you're interacting with a larger group of people, then it's got to be on. Our friend Pamela, who asked about her hotel room, she says she's in Mobile. So will be traveling to Mobile. So Pamela, Mobile and Mobile County does not have an ordinance like that. This is just Jefferson County, which is north of Mobile County in central Alabama. So you don't have a problem there in Mobile.
But
so
I would take notice, though, in Mobile, the city council, I believe, is going to take up a mask ordinance at this week's meeting. So it's possible that they could also implement a mask ordinance within the city of Mobile, but we'll see what the city council decides to do this week.
So stay tuned, Pamela. That is the best answer for you. Edward is asking, does this ordinance include businesses in the Birmingham city limits? Yes, Edward. Yes. Birmingham City already had a very similar ordinance that's been enacted for a few weeks. So if you've been following that in the Birmingham city limits, this is just kind of a larger scale version of that same ordinance, correct?
Yes, and Dr. Wilson did say that because the Birmingham ordinance, I believe, expires on maybe I think July 3rd. But once the Birmingham ordinance expires, then Birmingham will just be covered under the wider county ordinance. So then it would be exactly the same in Birmingham and in the rest of Jefferson County.
So there wouldn't be a need for two ordinances because Birmingham does lie in Jefferson County.
Right.
And Pamela, thank you. Yes, thank you. Have a good trip. Be safe. Another question that we have gotten about other cities, kind of like what Pamela was talking about, we know that Jefferson County and Mobile County are the only counties with independent health authorities that are allowed to enact rules like this. What other cities besides Birmingham have put in a mask ordinance?
So the cities of Montgomery and Selma have both the mayors have issued executive orders mandating face masks in public. It's worded very similarly to the Jefferson County order. So Montgomery, Selma, Madison, the city of Madison up near Huntsville, they have a requirement in certain public buildings like city offices, city hall, that kind of thing, but not for the wider city, and they have not taken that step yet. There are, as I mentioned earlier, Mobile, the city council is going to consider a mask ordinance this week at its meeting. It's on the agenda. Mayor Sandy Stimpson has been lobbying on Twitter pretty hard for the city council to go ahead and pass a mask ordinance similar to what Birmingham has, what Jefferson County has. Tuscaloosa Mayor Walt Maddox said that, also on Twitter, said that he believes his city council, the city council in Tuscaloosa, will pass a similar mask ordinance as well. So it does seem like, and with what the COVID numbers have been doing in Alabama lately, last week our numbers just skyrocketed, just really off the charts numbers for us last week, and so a lot of the local governments are now reacting to that.
I'm trying not to have shady eyes, y'all. I'm looking at your comments and trying to answer all of your questions. Quickly, I'll answer Kitty and Carla. We don't know the penalties for a dollar amount right now. That was not specified in the order. Maybe it will be in a coming order, maybe, or maybe an announcement from the health authority. But right now we don't know a dollar amount for enforcement. Everybody asking about separate counties. I don't have those numbers in front of me. I don't think Dennis does either about specific numbers. If you're asking about the mask ordinance, Jefferson County is the only county that has a mask ordinance. If you want to know about numbers, let me know and I can get somebody on this week to talk about that. We just right now don't have that information in front of us. Last question, Dennis. There's a lot of people who have asked about if they have health problems and they feel like wearing a mask makes it hard for them to breathe or hard for them and their health issues. What did the order say for people experiencing health issues that may be impeded by masks? Yeah, so the order is a little bit, I don't want to say vague, but it's non-specific. It says that it's titled medical exam. I'm sorry, that's the wrong one. Personal safety.
So the covering or face masks shall not be required when wearing such a face covering or mask poses a greater mental or physical health, safety, or security risk, such as when a person has trouble breathing, is unconscious, incapacitated, or unable to remove the face covering without assistance. So that, and it lists some examples here. Things like persons who are working on ladders at a height, persons who are wearing other respiratory protection, persons who are engaging in heavy physical exertion or operating heavy equipment, or who are working in an environment where a face covering would hinder communications that they need to do their job safely.
The latter part is interesting there.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you would be pretty socially distanced, I would think, if you're way up there on a ladder, but maybe not. Maybe they're co-laddering. I don't know.
True. Jeannie wants us to take a few minutes and remember to put out the wash your mask PSA. And you're right, Jeannie, wash your mask. I will say maybe don't dry it though, because I dried mine and it shrunk like a baby mask. So
you can just line dry those. They don't take very long.
Right. Wash it, line dry it, make sure that it's clean. If you're like me, gets lipstick and makeup on it, and you need to wash it. So thank you for that, Jeannie. We appreciate it. And one other thing I wanted to say, let me find her. Terry says she has lupus, has been out in and out of the hospital. We are thinking about you, Terry. You've got this. You can do it. And we are sending all of our good vibes and everything like that to you as well. So thank all of you so much for joining us today. If you have more questions about the mask ordinance, please leave it here. I will make sure they get to Dennis and we will get them answered. We will look into those water park questions because there's a lot of people who must be ready to go to the water park. So we'll look into it for y'all, and I will get any other questions to Dennis. So thank all of you so much for coming and joining us today on your lunch break. And we will see, and thank you, Dennis, for taking time to explain all of this to us. And for everybody watching, we will see you tomorrow.
Happy to be here. Thank you.